he made millions. He was just scamming people for millions and millions, just getting old crappy wines, repackaging them, and then selling them out there. But you said when you get certain tastes of wine, let's say they're grading their wine, they send them in. How do they keep the batches? Like, how close is the taste and quality between one batch? Is it like they get a harvest of grapes and then all those grapes kind of taste the same? How do they differentiate, or how much does it change between the casks? Or I don't know the language to even ask this question. I don't know if that has made sense.
It's a really good question. So yeah, the variation can be massive. It can be from bottle to bottle. It can be from barrel to barrel. It can be from literal like row to row, like trunk to trunk, like different pocket in the vineyard. They can blend vineyards together, or they can do all kinds of different processes of fermentation where maybe they destem the grapes, or maybe they ferment it whole cluster. They can ferment in like different vessels, anywhere from like stainless steel to concrete to plastic bins to clay amphora. And then vintage variation plays a role too. If it was like a really cool and rainy, wet year, the acidity is going to be higher. Sugars will be lower because of UV penetration. Hotter year, higher alcohol, higher sugar. Process of fermentation, right? So in terms of like quality wine, absolutely you want that variation, because it's essentially an expression of place. Like, this came from this specific pocket and this is what the soil was comprised of. Maybe it's limestone or schist or sand or clay, or a mix of like all of the above. And like, that's all going to impart different things. When are they going to be picking? Are they picking for acid? Are they picking for flavor? Are they picking for balance? Like, what are they picking for? Because if you're making sparkling wine, you want higher acidity because it's going to go through 2 fermentations. But if you're doing like a big, bold, heavy red wine, you're going to want to let that fruit hang until late into the fall to really develop all of those flavors, but also balance and acidity and texture and all of that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of like homogenous products on the market for like the average consumer that doesn't care. It's like no different than going to McDonald's or like a franchise where you're like, okay, I know what I'm going to get. I want it to be the same every single year. And that's where the manipulations come in, where they can add sugar and adjust for flavor so it tastes the same. Yeah. But in the kind of realm that I'm existing within, I want to taste like, like I know, for example, like 2018 from BC, it was a really hot but also smoky year. They had a lot of wildfires. So that actually permeates and comes through in some of the resulting wines. And some people argue it's a flaw. And they're having the same challenges this year. So it's like vintage variation. It tells the story of like what went on. And then you just sort of like, it's a process of deduction. And yeah, it's just so fascinating. Like, the more you get into it, the more you're like, wow, you can choose your own adventure. Like, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? It's like, one winemaker described it to me as like a game of inches. And it's just this cumulative sort of like journey where you're learning. You only have one kick at the can per year. You only have one harvest. And then you're like, okay, maybe I learned this thing because we got damage from hail. And then next year, it's a completely different story. And you try to apply those things you learned last year, but they no longer apply. So yeah, it's really fascinating. That's why I get so like excited when I talk about wine. I'm like, it's so cool, but so hard at the same time. So yeah.
Well, I thought you kind of see a similar thing with like certain vegetables. Like, for example, I remember like the Japanese will actually grow haricot vert, the French green beans, so they're all the same length, so that way they cook evenly. But in a lot of places you buy them, they're uneven sizes, so you have to actually like alter your cooking accordingly. Like even cutting up carrots, like thicker, thinner, you have to change your knife cut in accordance so they're the same size, so they all cook evenly. But it's like, but that's nature. Things don't always come out the same size. In fact, they usually don't.
Well, attention to detail.
Yeah.
Because the devil's in.
Thank you for listening. This has been a clip from an actual longer recording that I'll try to leave a link to on the screen or somewhere around here where you're listening to this.
Presents. 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 Presents.
Peasants.
Okay. Okay.